All right, we are back and live and well. And I'm gonna say, just because we didn't, Happy New Year to everybody. I'm Mazvita Maraire. This is Seattle Sports Weekly, and we've been traveling and following sports teams and whatnot. And that's what you do, right? When you have a sports show, and as I said, Seattle Sports Weekly here on Rainier Avenue Radio World, and we are live, and that's what makes us unique, along with the other shows here. Yeah, live radio. There's just something about live show. Now, look, you can rewatch the show on YouTube, StreamYard, and as a podcast and those things. But hey, there's just something about live radio, the uniqueness of it and everything else. And so, it'll never go out of style. And I tell you, from this perspective, you're always kind of nervous each time. You try to do your prep, but you never really know how it's going to go until it goes. It's like a live show. The difference between a movie and a live Broadway, or well, if you listen to a CD or a performance, as our great illustrious producer D Money will tell you, he's a performer, him and his people. So, but yeah, there's a little edginess that comes with it, and it's awesome. And so, just glad to be here. And we are, like I said, live, and we're just gonna go over all the happenings that we can. And I notice I never get through all of them, and that's okay. And that's the way that it should happen. And going through all the stuff, sports that's happening in Seattle. And this is that corner right about now that it's actually heating up and it's starting. You're the Kraken are the only team I would say that are in full swing. Well, you've got your basketball teams as well, but really it's about the ramp up. Obviously the Seahawks are coming to get a new coach, and the Sounders are just starting up. And of course, yeah, you already know we got the legend coming in here momentarily just to talk about the beginning of the Sounders preseason, and did they do enough? So talk about that. And Greg Lewis is going to come on, the legend. That's what we do. We bring on legends so they can tell you the insight, and I just turn on the mic about the respective sports there. So he'll talk about football, and really get a sense of when he played, and I'll ask Peter as well, just from the college athletes these days. Do you commit to the program or do you commit to a coach? And I think I know what Peter's answer will be, but you know what? Let's get Peter Hatrip on. And he's always willing and able to come on the show. We appreciate that. Peter, how you doing, my brother?
Doing well. Happy New Year to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know we only got you for a short amount of time, but it's the beginning of a long road for you, brother. You on this show, as you've always done. So up top, appreciate that.
Nice to be here again.
No, it's good. We got a lot. We got a lot to cover this year, just in terms of what the Sounders are doing. Let me just ask you this: when you committed from prep to SPU, well, I know the answer, but was it the school or the coach?
It was the coach in the program, and the coach was the program at the time. So, and to be honest, there was a time after my freshman year when the Sounders approached Cliff McGrath about becoming the head coach, and he was seriously considering it. I think he made a good decision, seeing as the team in the league folded shortly thereafter. But I remember going up to him and saying, I committed to you for the 4 years. They don't all have to be here. The next 3 could be at the Sounders. So I was ready to go if I needed to.
Oh, legend. That's typical. Oh, that's typical hat trip there, no doubt. But yeah, and it's just, is it just as rampant in terms of, I know we hear about the football, in soccer, and I know you coach as well. W- we don't see as much movement from the soccer players, or is there movement in terms of?
Yeah, there's some, but I don't think there's quite the same movement as coaches either. And the new factor that affects all the, well, really football, maybe basketball, and to a lesser extent, the other sports is the NIL factor. Not only can you move, but you can get a pay raise. So it's a different animal now. That the sport is the same. The business around it has changed significantly. I'm sure Greg will have have a lot of thoughts on that. He could have made a pretty penny in his day while he was at the UW.
Well, you both could have, if now was the time, right? If you were playing now. But let's go into the Sounders a little bit. Last we saw them, they lost 1-0 in the Western Conference semifinals to LAFC, and it didn't seem like a 1-0, right? It seemed like the score was actually, LAFC dominated the Sounders. Have they done enough in the offseason?
Well, I'm not sure. If you look back at the game, I'm not so sure that LAFC did dominate the Sounders. The Sounders missed two easy chances, or two very good chances early on in the game. And LAFC scored on almost their only shot on target. I think if you go back and look at the numbers. We'll see if Pedro de la Vega is as advertised. Maybe they have done enough. I think this is the first player that they've had since Dempsey and Obafemi Martins. If what we're hearing is what we're going to see, it's the first time they've had somebody that can beat players consistently and create chances for both himself and his teammates, not only out wide, but in the middle of the field. I think that's been something they've missed. They've found other ways to be effective, for sure, because their record in that time has been very good. But, he could be a missing element, and, hopefully he is something special, and we've got him at a young age, and hopefully we'll get to see him for a while.
And they press conference tomorrow. I'm gonna we got the little email, so obviously they'll be announcing him there. But I think you're right. Obviously, my point, I guess, is against LAFC, they didn't have that extra something that I thought could tip the scale, and that's why I say, all the hundreds games you play, it's a close game, but I just didn't see the Sounders after missing their two shots. Really. You got to remember, I should have went back and watched the game again, but I know they just, to your point, this could be the guy to do that. So I talked with João Paulo yesterday at training, and I was going to play the video, but let's hold on because I want to hear you talk a little bit more. If he goes, are you going to have him? He's going to run towards the goal, obviously, towards players. What are you going to do with Morris and Ladero?
You mean Rui Diaz?
Rui Diaz. I'm sorry. Orlando City knows what to do with
Ladero. And that's. I'll be interested to see how Brian deals with this. You look at their setup. Could they change and play two up top? Could they play, a foursome in midfield of João Paulo holding or Atencio holding? And Rusnak on one side of the diamond, Roldan on the other side of the diamond, or Rusnak at the point of the diamond, two up front with Morris and De La Vega, or Rui Diaz and De La Vega, or are they going to go with the 2-3-1? I'll be interested to see how he pieces these together, because he's got some interesting pieces, and then figuring out how they're going to work as a group. I haven't seen enough of De La Vega. Can he play wide and come in from the outside? Is he more comfortable right down the middle? I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see how that all gets plugged in together. But he's got some dynamic pieces to go. I think Ruiz is fired up and excited to show that he's still got something left in the tank. I was out at training last Wednesday, and they had a few of us ex-Sounders out there to wander around and watch him play on the puddled field, which was, and even at that time, they looked sharp at times. So I'm excited to see what they can do. I think there's a lot to be excited about going forward.
Yeah, to your point, I think tomorrow is the last public practice, because they leave Friday at Fort Dent.
Yes. Luckily, it's not on Syntrex.
Yeah, no, and yeah, because they're moving over to the new place. It used to be called Fort Dent, right? Just so
it was Fort Dent, yes.
Yeah, I want to make sure. Yeah, exactly. So tomorrow's the last. The press conference is over at the new facility, but really, so maybe they're moving a day early. Yeah, and then Leo Chu. It's almost like De La Vega is a more exciting Leo Chu or a more refined Leo Chu. So you don't see them playing at the same time, or I know I'm hypothetically, but what does this all do to Leo Chu?
Well, I think it puts pressure on him to be more consistent, because he had flashes last year. Early on, he was dynamic and looked dangerous. As they started to go through the season, either people started figuring him out, and he didn't have enough answers to change and do something different, or he ran out of steam. I don't know. But if you looked at his early production compared to his late production, there was a drop off. So he's shown he's got some abilities. Can he do it consistently? And if not, maybe he does give them a wild card coming off the bench out wide. That's dangerous. Maybe they can play together. I don't know. I'd say maybe they go 3-5-2. Because they have the pieces. They have a lot of options, and Brian's got a lot of versatile players. I think he likes that. Both Roldans can play in different roles. Jordan Morris can play in different roles, wide or up top. Rusnak can play in different roles in the midfield. He's got a plethora of young guys with the Atencia and Vargas, and these guys that are all trying to get time, and he's got a lot of options available. It's just what's your best lineup, and then how do you go about rotating it and keeping it fresh, but some continuity.
And Danny Leyva as well is back, and I talked to him yesterday in training. But to your point, I think Atencio, right? He's seeing some national. I think it's a breakout year for him. And you mentioned him being a holding midfielder. Size and I think skill wise, he could be the difference maker in kind of how this shapes up, I think.
Yeah, I still think he's missing some things going forward. I think his passing range and quickness of decision still needs to get better. But you can plant him in there, and you could play he and João Paulo next to each other as two holding midfielders, a double pivot in there. Like I said, I'll be really interested to see what Brian settles on as his best formation and best ideas going forward, because they say he's got a lot of pieces and he's got a lot of options.
Do you still, transition? João Paulo yesterday said something that they were in transition, they were good, as you know. They like to, when they steal the ball, that first pass has to be forward, and they want to do it within 6, 8 seconds. But they were stalling in the final third. How do you rectify that?
Well, I think that Della Vega is a guy that hopefully that's what they're looking to, that rectifies that, because yes, they almost had two speeds last year: fast forward or slow. Either they played really quickly forward or they kept the ball and went sideways a lot and didn't get going. They need somebody that when they're in possession, after there's no counter on, that can change the pace of the game, that all of a sudden can speed it up. It's going side to side to side. Now, all of a sudden, either bursting with the ball or playing a quick combination. I think that's what they're missing. That's what they were missing last year. And I think, they have the pieces to put that together. I think it's just a matter of how quickly will they mesh?
All right. Well, we're gonna find out, because you're gonna, if not weekly, every other week, because you know how this MLS season starts. So, we're gonna go on break in a minute, but I'll bring all those guys in so we can just have a quick round table discussion. I was like, if y'all know each other, y'all legends, but I'll ask Greg about soccer a little bit, because yeah, we're gonna ask a former NFL player, and it always amazes me. He's the first Doak Award winner given to the top college running back. He's the first person to win that. It just always blows my mind, and so I do believe he's got some soccer blood. I can't remember if one of his daughters played, and of course, Mr. Scott Ligo, he of UW, and also he played a little bit of soccer. So, gentlemen, why don't you come on in? Just have you guys say what's up, and then we'll go to the break, and Pete's is gonna drop off. But I just didn't. I don't know, man. Yeah, I just didn't feel like, okay, Pete, go and let these guys come on. We can do kind of a little bit of a round table about what's going on with Pete. Answered about, do you commit to the school or do you commit to the coach? Greg?
Well, I think that's changed. I think when I was coming up and playing, you committed to the school, and there were a lot more folks that, during those days, once you committed, you stayed. There weren't as many transfer opportunities and all of that, so you had to make a decision that said, regardless if this coach leaves or if we're in a different system, I'm still willing to go here because of all the other things that are combined. Nowadays, with the transfer portal and all that, I think people do commit to a coach. They commit to a style of play, a coach that appreciates the skill set that they have. And when that individual's gone, they have to look for that opportunity elsewhere. But that opportunity exists. It didn't necessarily exist when I played. So I think today you do commit more to a coach than you do a school.
Now, Scott, you've got it different, right? Because of how you work with the kids, right? Some of the kids don't you have.
Yeah, I mean, Maz, I think Greg's right on. I think that unfortunately, the portal has definitely changed the way the kids look at those things. I mean, obviously, Greg played for Coach James, and the UW, and being a local guy, and that was kind of the old model and stuff like that. But nowadays, to be honest with the portal, and then you add the NIL piece, it changes the whole landscape of what we're doing. And unfortunately, we've seen the effects of that in the last 10, 14 days with the situation in Bama and Washington and Arizona, and now San Jose State. There's just so many layers to this that they have to fix, and we got to figure it out sooner than later, because what we're doing right now is that can't be the model. This thing has just gone absolutely crazy, and it's sad, to be honest with you. And it's it's hard to tell a kid not to turn down the money, but it's also how many times we're just going to let them go from place to place and think it's good for them as a person. And let's be honest, let's be perfectly blunt. I mean, not every portal transfer story is a good one. Yeah. So,
and I'll do this just to round it about. I mean, I get the two in terms of, you go to SPU to play soccer, for McGrath. You go to the UW to play for Don James. You know what I'm saying? But here's the deal. There's also movement in terms of the coaches and the assistant coaches. How much does that affect that movement? And Peter, you can hop in as well. But how much is that affecting the movement as well?
Well, I think it makes a huge difference. I mean, you look at not just Don James, who was around decades, and you know he wasn't going anywhere, but the other coaches back in, well, Pac-10 at that time, they stayed in the same place. For people weren't coming and going so quickly. It was a different animal, and the coaches weren't so eager to. I mean, contracts actually seemed to be contracts then, and schools weren't going to say, "Well, you got another 3 years, but we'll buy it out." So that's changed that picture. So, everyone wants to look at the kids and say, "Well, they should stay." Until everybody starts honoring the contracts and staying for a little bit longer period of time, it's tough for the kids because you are recruited by a coach and by a staff and their personality, as well as the school. It goes both ways. I'd love to see people stay longer. If they're going to be this crazy about it, maybe everyone should just be signing at least a 4-year contract. Maybe it should be a contract instead of because it's it's the Wild West right now. And
Greg, who was your offensive coordinator when you went to UW?
Gary Pinkel. And,
That's right.
He had a long historic career as a head coach, parlaying off of the success that we had at the University of Washington, winning Rose Bowls in 90 and national championship in 91. But I think, the underlying thing here, and we all know it, the big elephant in the room is the multiple millions of dollars that are involved in this all now. I think if you go back and look at Don James's salary, he probably, with all the benefits and bonuses and everything he was getting, he was probably making somewhere between $250,000 to $500,000 a year, generously thinking. Nowadays, if a coach can leave Arizona making $2.5 million a year and come to University of Washington make $7.5 million, $8 million, it's hard for that person to say, no, I'm going to stay here and turn down generational, money that can, help your family for generations. And so the big money that is now engaged and involved with college athletics, there's always been money, but let's not, underplay this. The amount of money that's available now is real money. And, it's hard to turn that down and walk away. And now with NIL, the players have an opportunity. There are kids in college football right now making more than guys in the NFL. There are kids in college making more than guys in the NFL. And so if you can parlay an NIL opportunity to, $1 million or $500,000 or whatever, and not that all the kids are getting, but some are, then it's, naive of us to say they should stay at the University of Washington or they should stay at Indiana and not come to the University of Washington, because that's a reality now. Some of those guys in the NFL. And the other point is this: some guys will make money in college and will never play a down in the NFL. Only 1% of the college athletes will play professional football. So if you have a chance to make money while you're in college, it's hard now to say no. And so I'm not blaming the kids. I'm saying this is the system that we've created, and that's why things are the way they are, because the system allows it. If I had been under those systems and circumstances, who am I to say I wouldn't have left and taken I was a dad my junior year in college and living off of $500 a month, which is what my scholarship check was. Do you believe that I would have turned down an opportunity to go somewhere and make $100,000, $500,000? I mean, I have to admit, I probably would have taken the money and looked elsewhere as well if that was the opportunity that was presented to me.
All right, let's do this. All right, we're going to go on a quick break, and then Peter's going to hop off, and guys, we'll come back and delve a little bit more in college football. So, D-Money, take us into the break, and then we'll come right back.
Your community radio station will provide you with more information. Rainier Avenue Radio.
Celebrate Black History Month at the Call to Conscience Black History Month Museum, formerly Columbia City Theater, 4916 Rainier Avenue South. Call to Conscience Black History Month Museum features exhibits and installations. It's a guided tour.
Installations include the Seattle Black Panther Party, the Black Heritage Society of Washington, the Rainier Cinema Black Movie Posters Collection, the Hartsfield Family Enslaved Quilt Collection, Revere XR, Negro League Baseball's Seattle Steelheads, NAACP Washington, Alaska, and Oregon, Giselle's Famous Chicken, Nasty Mix Records, Sir Mix-a-Lot, South Seattle Emerald, the Museum of History and Industry, Community Keepsakes and Memorabilia, the Total Experience Gospel Choir and Pat Wright, the Black Prisoners Caucus, a display from the Tacoma Buffalo Soldiers Museum.
Tuesdays through Sundays from 11 a.m. 7 p.m. There will be no other location where you can celebrate the achievements and the achievers of the Pacific Northwest and Seattle while recognizing the Black excellence that shines today. For more information, visit RainierAvenueRadio.org or call 206-290-9685. Join Rainier Avenue Radio from 5 to midnight for Sunday evening sound sessions. Jazz from the cabinets from Big Poppy.
That's right. It's time once again for Jazz from the Cabinets with Big Poppy.
Sergio LaCour's Love Line.
It's Sergio's Love Lines with Sergio LaCour. Go to the phone line. Tell her who we talking to.
Sage Prince, Just My Opinion.
This is Sage. That's just about going to do it for the first half of Just My Opinion.
K-Fox Night Beat with Nasty Ness Rodriguez.
The beat of the Fox. K-Fox Night Beat, Nasty Ness.
You know what? You're going to listen from 5 to midnight. Just turn it on and don't stop. DJ Alibaba. The underground surround sound start time. Paul Pinch.
Tuning in. My name is Paul Pearson.
Sunday evening sound sessions on Rainier Avenue Radio. Trust me, you'll be listening the entire time from 5 to midnight. Sunday evening, your sound session on Rainier Avenue Radio.
We are strong, we are resilient, and we will get through this together. But these are stressful times, and it's important to also practice good self-care. It's normal to feel overwhelmed, anxious, or afraid, but there is hope. Reach out to someone, connect with your friends, stay in touch with your community, and know that you are not alone.
I'm Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not cooking up a batch of my famous wood-flavored chicken, I'm listening to RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Ever went over a friend's house to eat and the food just ain't no good?
All right, we are back. Kind of putting the hour clock a little bit around, and yeah, we've got Greg Lewis on. The pleasure to have him on, the legend, obviously, and then Scott Lago, also former UW coach, just talking about the state of college football. So I'm going to ask him some questions that might not be this year. Trying to ask a little bit harder questions. Not that I don't, but a little bit more kind of have people make a determination. So, all right. So, gentlemen, you back? There we go. All right. Greg, you probably can't answer this per se, but Scott, what went wrong with Kalen DeBoer?
Well, I don't know if that's I'm saying that not a fair question, but I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with Coach DeBoer in the realm that, I mean, he got him to the national championship game. I think that was, goal number one and got him there. I was our last show that we did, Maz, I did tease you a little bit. I thought maybe there's a chance that the Michigan situation might, pique his interest in that situation, never knowing what the domino effect of, what ended up happening. To be quite frank and honest with you, I mean, Jimmy Sexton, the agent, was the one who was the domino in this whole thing. And that old boy, he made some money off this deal. So, and I'm not saying, I'm not trying to create a controversy here, but
I can show you the text messages you sent me. But
there's a lot of what I'm saying here is the truth to the deal.
Oh, yeah.
He orchestrated this whole thing, and he got everything he wanted. He got a lot of guys, a lot more money, and his account got a lot more money. And so, which is a concern for me personally as a college football fan. Should an agent have that much collusion or influence in the situation? And the collusion is a big word, but it seems like that's kind of apparent to the situation. And but job done one. But I go back to the bigger question, Maz. I mean, again, the NCAA's lack of leadership in this whole thing. They need to look at the calendar. We need to have a moratorium where there's a 2-week hiatus. You can't go poach kids. They have to sit down with the head coach. They have to have a meeting with him. They have to kind of hear his plan. And after that point, they want to go, they can go. I get it. I'm free for all that. But what we have just done to 4 programs and just let this free for all, and everybody can come in and get them, and they can't do anything to defend themselves. And it's terrible. And we're imploding this game, I feel, and I think that we need to absolutely sit down. And now we've got a great situation. Not great situation. We've got a situation where we got a guy like Nick Saban, Chris Peterson, some retirees, find some good old ADs and put them in a room and say, come up with a plan for us, put it on a whiteboard for us, and let's see if we can go do this thing. I mean, I don't know if that's, the Chip Kelly plan. I don't know what it is, but they've got to fix something real quick, because this is not good for the sport.
There's a lot there, Greg. I mean, can you fault the Scott Boras of NCAA football?
Yeah, I think here's where I think we have to really, kind of following up on what Scott said, take a look at what college football is. And, for, decades, probably, over 100 years, we've had this semblance of amateurism that's kind of slowly been creeping more towards professionalized sports on college campuses. Well, I'll say the Band-Aid has been ripped off now. I mean, we are fully have professional sports now being played on college campuses. And you can't tell me that if a student can make $1 million playing football on the college campus, that school comes first. You can't convince me of that. You absolutely can't. So I think this whole guise of amateur sports and the NCAA governing it as a college or collegiate athletic sport with student athletes is a sham now. And so we have to go ahead and do what the NFL does. The NFL has deadlines, guidelines, structures, times when free agency is available, when it's not, and when the season actually starts, when there are all of these parameters around that keep things from happening, like Scott just talked about, where, the Chicago Bears can't just come over to the Dallas Cowboys right now and, convince all their players to leave and come join Dallas. Chicago. It just doesn't work like that, because there are rules, regulations, and guidelines, which professional sports are governed by. We're trying to govern a professional sport with amateur athletic rules, which is a farce, and it's ridiculous. And, it sounds like there are a lot of winners in this from a monetary standpoint, and there are some, but let's make no mistake. I played in the NFL. There was a guy in the locker room named John Elway. On Mondays, which was my favorite day of the NFL, not Monday Night Football, Monday was payday. There was a big difference between John Elway's Monday and my Monday. A huge, huge difference. So there are a lot of student athletes that aren't the Michael Penixes, that aren't the premier players, that get lost in this whole shuffle and caught up in this because they don't have the same options, opportunities, NIL deals, and all of that. And some of those things can lead to some real problems for those individuals. And I know I want to use one kid's name in particular. Now, I know he's going to end up at Alabama with plenty of NIL money and all of this. But here's what I mean when I say this is now a sham when we talk about amateur athletics. Austin Mack was a junior in high school when the UW was recruiting him. Mm-hmm. And the UW lost their quarterback for that particular class to Ohio State. So they went to Austin Mack, convinced this 16-year-old kid, I think at the time, give up your senior year in high school, give up your proms, your dances, you're hanging out with buddies, maybe you play baseball in the spring, give up all being a kid, that last year of being a kid, give that up to come to University of Washington and start early because we need a quarterback for our class because we lost the one that we had. Give all that up, come here, be an adult earlier. And then at the end of that season, the coach and the whole staff takes off and leave. Now, this kid may end up having an opportunity to follow them, go to Alabama or whatever, but let's just say he didn't. There's a kid who gave up virtually his last year of being a kid for adults and what they needed him to do, and then he loses out. And let alone the kids in that locker room that aren't going to get NIL deals, kind of getting caught up and lost in the shuffle. So even though this is a system and I'm not blaming any person or individual, there are definitely some losers in all of this.
Greg, great point. Why don't you take our listeners and viewers into maybe each kind of process is different, but who's involved in that discussion from the school? And maybe each one is like, who goes to Austin Mack? Is it the coach? Is it the just because I think that's fascinating. You brought up something that a lot of people don't understand. Who is in that kind of that diplomatic party, you will, that goes to Austin Mack?
Well, are you talking about the part of getting him here early or him ending up in Alabama?
Well, let's start with going and saying, give up, your senior year and all of that. And then we can go to the Alabama part of it.
Sure. College football recruiting is something that is a 365-day, 24-hour-a-day process that never stops. I was asked when I, unfortunately got injured and, dropped out of NFL pretty early, Greg, would you like to come coach with me? My running back coach from UW had a head coaching job. And I saw what that entailed. And I had 2 little kids. I was like, absolutely not. Because you are either coaching, you're watching film till, the wee hours in the morning, or you're on the road recruiting, and your lifeblood is really convincing 16, 17, 18-year-old kids to come join your program. So the process with Austin Mack was, continuous. There's text messaging, email. Well, I don't know if they use email as much anymore. Social media, phone calls happening 24 hours a day. Kids, I've heard stories of kids having to change their phone number because they're getting bombarded from assistant coaches. Now they have, in my day, we had a recruiting coordinator, Dick Baird, who had certain things he could do, but now they have general managers. Just the fact they have general managers for college football should tell you something about the level of amateurism it really is. They have scouting departments now. They have people who are watching the portal now. So he's getting calls from assistant coaches, recruiting coordinators, head coaches. And the message not only has come to my school, but now it's, if you come a year early, you can start getting the process of being coached by college coaches and develop now. So you'll be so much better by the time it's time for you to step on the field and walk on the field. You get acclimated to college. You have the school part down, so you're not adjusting to that. So you can play earlier. And the message is so you can spend less years in college, ultimately, and go to the NFL. But what you're not stating is, but you're coming a year early. So yeah, I might leave after 3 years of actual playing, but I came a year early. I gave up a year being a kid. So there's a lot of convincing the kid that this is in his best interest by a lot of people. And, some of those things are credible and true, but at the end of the day, they still are asking this young man, who I think was 17 the day he came on campus. He might be 18 now. I'm not sure his date of birth, but this is a kid who's now just turning 18, who's left high school year early, and now on to his second college, and has never thrown a pass in a game. So this, there are really a lot of things there to unpack and think about. And he probably signing his second NIL deal, by the way.
Scott, is there any messaging in terms of, I know you're obviously former coach, but I'm leaning a little bit towards your work with kids. Is there any messaging there in terms about, when they talk to coaches or anything like that? Or
yeah, well, Maz, there's a couple things. One is, I don't know if Greg knows this, but the NCAA just approved this. Now, if you're a junior, you can have your parents come and meet the coach at the school.
Yeah.
So let's just take a top-notch guy. I don't know how many parents are that wealthy where they can just take off work whenever time the coach shows up. But, now you get the parents involved in this whole thing. They make one step forward, like they got rid of the photo shoot thing. Great thing for the kids. You have to be on an official visit to have a photo shoot. Great deal. Then they go backwards and they allow the parents now to be part of the visit in their junior year. And it's like, what are we doing? We're making this worse. Again, going back to the calendar, how can we handle that? I heard a podcast this morning talking about exactly what Greg is talking about. Maybe they should just ban early enrollments. Maybe it's just stop that stuff. And that's we're not going to do that anymore. It's not fair to the kids. Like Greg said, let them have their last half of their senior year. Let them enjoy life. The best part of your year is you kind of get to be responsible, but your parents are still paying the bills.
Yeah,
good deal.
That's
Enjoy every minute of it, because when you get the other end, you're going to end up paying. And then, not to put the just a complete baha on this whole situation, but think about this one. And I'm going to keep the schools out of the name, but I do know this story came true. Kid left a very good program and a really good conference. Got in the transfer portal, went to a new school, gets to that new school, makes a deal, gets his NIL check, okay? Then takes his NIL check and cashes it. But the best part is coming. He then declares for the NFL draft. So I'm just going to put this out to when you said about advisement there, Maz. This is what I'm going to advise to these young people thinking this is a really good idea. And again, I'm not saying that all boosters are this way. That's not my point. But some people become powerful because they just know people and they just can make things happen. And you start stealing from people who are very wealthy. I don't know if that's always going to work out in the best half of your interest. And I'm just going to leave it at that. But, maybe some people think it's a genius move, but I would venture to say, I don't know if that's a really smart move. Right. But it's where what makes me mad, and Maz and you and I have talked about this for over the years. When this whole thing came down with, the Alston case and NIL was great, and the NCAA just threw their hands up and said, you guys can do whatever you want. That was where we started the whole problem. If we would have just put rules and regulations, and I don't know what the numbers are. I mean, can they cap it the amount of money they can give every year? I mean, they said right now, Ohio State's paid $13 million in the last couple of weeks. I mean, we all know that, Washington State and Oregon State aren't coming up with $13 million just to keep their roster. I mean, it's ridiculous what we've done, and we've made this thing happen, and we just have to figure this thing out. And if we can't, and I have always maintained this position, I don't think it's sustainable. I don't care who you are. I don't care how wealthy you are. You have a budget. It comes to a certain point. Let me look at the boosters down at Texas A&M. Got the two best classes, don't have a national championship. Georgia and Alabama are playing for the national championship. And what did they do? To Greg's point, they wrote a $78 million check, said goodbye to the coach, and then they spent another $100 million on the new staff and got them in. So they spent $178 million. How does that happen? They just turn on the oil spigots down there in Texas for a couple hours, got the 178, cut the checks. Here we go. And not everybody has those advantages. No. We have got to do something to make this better. And to Greg's other point, which is, that's what's so frustrating to me, is like if you go on any social media site or LinkedIn or whatever, and all these guys are doing all these collectives and all these great ideas. Oh my gosh, it's so great for all the student athletes and stuff like that. And I'm like, you're not telling the truth, because not everybody's getting those same deals. Mm-hmm. And the 4,000 kids that entered the portal, did everyone land a home? Did everyone get what they wanted, or are they going down? And then the other end of the scope, I just saw 2 days ago, Montana's best player just jumped in landed a deal at Temple. Not the greatest football program in the country, but probably got a better NIL deal than he could get in Montana. So he's gone. So Montana's best player, gone. And that's the other end of the spectrum. And these lower programs that can produce a kid that maybe was not seen as maybe good enough, and all of a sudden got progressed, got developed, did all the things, gone. And that's just, I'm for the kids to be able to move. But even just the unbridled, you can transfer as many times as you want. We got to put some stipulations in this stuff. If not,
all right, I'm going to turn the discussion a little bit. Jed Fisher, right? What the task at hand? What's the task at hand right now, Greg, for Jed Fisher? And Scott, obviously.
Yeah, Jed has an enviable task of rebuilding a program whose fans now have seen the promised land. They've seen a coach in 2 years go from 4-8 or 4-9, whatever we were,
4-9,
to 11-2 right out the gate. And frankly, we could have won those two games last year, the previous season that we ended up losing, to the national championship game in just a short period of time. And, they got that taste in their mouth. So Husky fans, now does Judd jump into a place where the expectations become unrealistic? I would argue that as of last Monday, not this Monday that just passed, but the previous Monday, that the Husky football program at that time was in worse shape than the day they fired Tyrone Willingham. I would argue that it was in worse shape on that Monday with the number of kids that were in the portal, the number of recruits that had decommitted, the coaching situation, not being a coach, none of that happening. So at that moment, when Jimmy Lake got fired, there were some really good players in the program. And it had been, there had been, whatever reasons Jimmy wasn't successful. I'm not going to go into that. That's a whole show. But when DeBoer came in, it was really plug in a few holes, bring in a positive culture, get these kids to understand that they can win, show them what they've done in the past, where this program's been, and then take off from there. And they brought in the right guy to pull the trigger. Two guys, Ryan Grubb and Michael Penix. They hit the jackpot there, although I know Grubb had been with DeBoer for a while. But I think Jedd Fisch's rebuild is a harder, tougher rebuild. Not only do you have, the situation with the number of kids that have jumped out and all the confusion going on, you still have the pull from their old coach, and you have NIL fully out there now, pulling at kids, tugging at kids, which might not necessarily been the case a couple years ago. They were still figuring it out. And especially when Tyrone was here, there was no NIL, there was no transfer portal and all those things. So Jedd is facing a much bigger rebuild right now than DeBoer did when he came in. And for people to expect that there's 12 teams now. And that's another perception. Well, now that 12 teams in the playoffs, we don't have to be quite as good as last year to get into the playoffs. So we should still get in. I think he's going to be facing the first couple of years, some tough, whatever you call it, expectations, I guess, from the fans that it would probably be pretty hard to live up to, because you're rebuilding a team from the ground up now. Their psyche, their mentality, you're fighting the pull from coaches that they know and love that are somewhere else. You're dealing with NIL. It's going to be interesting to see how much patience and how much, understanding the Husky Nation gives him. I think it was a great hire, a guy from this conference that's done well, that knows this, this area really well, has recruited in this footprint. He's exciting. He's an offensive guy, which, on the West Coast, that's West Coast football. So I think for a lot of reasons, they've hit a home run with who they hired. I just hope the expectations or his, future plans and all of that don't, kind of throw this awry over the next couple of years. So I think it might, and we're going into a brand new conference. Let's not forget about that. We're going into a brand new conference that's 18 teams that are just tough. And so all those things combined, I think it's going to be probably, an uphill climb for Jedd Fisch the next couple of years. But if he's the right guy, I think in that third year, we should be able to start to see, progress. If he does it earlier than that, then he's the greatest coach ever, just is. But if he's the right guy, I think in 3 years, we should see some substantial progress. And if he's not the right guy, it could be, a long time before Husky football can recover.
Scott, you were a coach. I mean, so you got your coaching staff in that room. What are we saying? What's our message? Besides united, stay united.
Well, I think most importantly, he was able to keep his offensive staff. Yep. He's got to go out and get his defensive group put together quickly, because that has a lot to do with where, we're talking about at the beginning of the show. Are you aligned to the coach or to the school? So those things are important to make sure you line up with the right guy. So I think that's important for him to get knocked out. To Greg's point, unfortunately, I was there in 93 to 95, and rep post Rose Bowls, and that's the expectation, is to get there. So once you've been to the Holy Land, that's what they all expect. So there's that issue. And I think, to be honest with you, I think that the other thing is that how well he can recruit. I mean, he's got to do a better job, and then it's a daunting task on the West Coast. Like I said to you, Maz, a couple of weeks ago, there was only 37 top guys in the state of California this year versus like 89 in Texas and 78 Florida. So what's here? So now with what Greg said, with us going to the Big Ten, we can widen that base, which is good. But boy, I mean, it's you're going to the common football fan. You're thinking you're going into the championship 12-0 is probably forgone for right now. I mean, I think most of these programs better start getting used to 9-3, 8-4, 7-5. It's going to be tougher, way tougher than people think, man. You have to go to Penn State, have to go to Michigan, have to go to Ohio State, or they're coming out. I mean, it's going to be way different of a scheduling, and so people got to get used to this. There's some fan bases that are like, oh wait, there's no way we're going to go right. I'm like, whoa. You haven't been back to the Midwest in the middle of the the late of the season. So I think there's some reality to that whole deal. But can they do a good job? And we'll see what the rest of the league does. I mean, there's a lot of questions down at USC right now. There's questions about, is Chip going to stay at UCLA? I mean, there's probably a big one maybe happening right now as we're speaking in this place called Ann Arbor, and maybe that guy's heading to be the Chargers head football coach. And what does that look like? Does it Sharon Moore to be the new head coach, which would be a good hire, I think, in a lot of ways. But that's some big keys to give to that big, national championship car. So,
does it make? Go ahead, finish, Scott, and then I'll ask this question.
No, I'm just saying, I mean, so we got a few more dominoes to get over with, and once we figure that piece out, then I think that but to get himself back on where he needs to be, finish up, get his defensive staff put together as fast as he can, and then hit the road as hard as he can and try to put together, a decent class and put this thing back together as fast as you can. But, and the great thing about the portal, you can do a lot of good things from it too. So the spring portal will help them too. They'll be able to get in there and look around, and there's going to be change. That is constant. That is constant in the whole deal.
Yeah, you kind of touched upon when I look here. I mean, he's got Brennan Carroll, so his whole offensive, staff is ready. Some concern, or let me rephrase that. When do you get concerned if he hasn't had his defensive that side of the ball filled up? January 23rd, the whole offense is filled up. Like yesterday, today.
I mean, as soon as possible, bro. I mean, we're talking the next signing date is February 7th.
Right.
So we're right around the corner. I mean, you just have to have that stuff done. And it sucks. I mean, you got to put together, going back to, Dick was with me when I was at the UW. I mean, that was just Dick. There's a player personnel, there's a general manager, there's all kinds of layers of this whole thing. And to put all that together quickly to turn and run and make this thing happen, he's got to have it faster than yesterday. And, and the other part too is to the NIL piece, what can the local, guys here do and help them get this thing going faster? I mean, unfortunately, I don't know if necessarily the Ohio State $13 million in 2 weeks is the model we'll be using, but got to figure something out quickly. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy where it's at. That's for sure.
No, it's funny to Greg's point as I look here and at the UW, and they have chief of staff, right? He's a great guy, Aaron Nachi, you all know, director of football operations and all that stuff. And I'm going, geez, that's quite the list. But is it for certain that the two Ing is not coming back, right? And or do we know that? I mean, it's interesting that it's kind of been dormant about what's going to happen with Ing and his counterpart.
Well, I know Ing and Morrell were there the day that he got here on that Sunday. They were in the locker room when he was announced and was shaking hands, and I'm sure that they're trying to do as much as they can. That's the other, of the stick. I mean, look how many guys, just look at the OC from the Seahawks already took the job of the Bear. I mean, so we know that he's not staying. It's just that fast and that quick. And even Tommy Reese, who was at Alabama, then went to Georgia, now saying that he's going to end up being a tight ends coach. So it moves quickly. Tight ends coach in the NFL. But my point is that you got to fill this out faster than you think. And I know they've mentioned Osai from the Philadelphia Eagles, maybe disguise his name, that maybe he would come with Jed because they'd worked together previously. I mean, if it could happen, I think make that happen tomorrow. and get that thing done. And I think that would excite a lot of kids because they can play for an NFL guy who's young and upcoming, and I think that would be a good move. But it's a
That's
tough.
one of the.
Go ahead,
That's
Greg.
one of the things, Scott, I was just going to say is you got to make the right decision, but you got to make it fast. And those two things don't usually work together in life. You usually think that I'm going to make a good decision. I'm going to take my time. I'm going to check all the boxes. I'm going to do my background checks and all of that. So as a college football coach, that's one thing you always have to be, connecting, networking, getting to know people, developing relationships, strategizing with folks who may not even be on your staff at that time, because at any time, change could happen and you might need to make a move fast. Like Scott is not lying. If you got to sign kids by the 7th and you got kids that you're re-recruiting and other kids that you're still recruiting, and them to know who the defensive coordinator, what the staff is going to be like. And kids always, one thing you always hear kids say in recruiting, I developed a really good relationship with. And just like anything else in life, Maz, relationships trump a lot of things. And if I feel like I can come in and work with this person and get along with them, the scheme and, their name and all that's good. But that relationship piece is so important. And that's why in college coaches, when you're, sort of looking at folks who are going to be good at this job, it's those who can develop relationships quickly and then know how to follow through and follow up and do all of those kinds of things. So it's going to be hard from that standpoint, regardless of whoever you bring in, because they don't have a lot of time to develop relationships. So sometimes you do look for somebody who is probably already out there, developing relationships, and got some kids they can bring along with them. Unless, like you said, they have a great NFL pedigree that can help to that point. But the bottom line is it needs to happen right now, as soon as possible.
Will Harris.
Kind of going back to the, original part of this whole thing with DeBoer, even Dannon came out and said it that, he kind of had a feeling at Thanksgiving. Yeah. And I think if you are a good AD and if you're a good coach, like Greg's saying, you always have a list in your desk of a guy that can replace your DB guy, a linebacker guy in your room. You have to have that next to your desk and be ready to go. And if you're a good AD, your guy, let's be honest, the money is out there for these guys and they could leave. You better have a list of guys that you can go and tap and get immediately in and think about bringing. It's just that fast. And these, as we all deal with the world of social media, we know how fast this stuff gets out. And that's as fast as it's going now in college athletics. It's crazy.
All right, Greg, thank you so much for taking the time out to hop on. And Scott Lago, thank you also. And appreciate you both. And we'll talk to you next week. We'll talk to you down the road. And listeners, thank you. We can't do it without you and the viewers. And D-Money, you're the best in the business. All right, we're out for Seattle Sports Weekly. Thanks again, fellas.
See you, boys.